Hi, this is Peter Godinez, KDY TV. The last interview I did with these gentlemen, it was so popular, they wanted to do a sequel to it on the 2 other C's. So we are going to continue this program, and we're going to find out about the critical thinking and the creativity. So last time we covered collaboration, and now we're going to go into the other 2 C's that we did last time, that we missed last time. So again, Dr. John, why don't you start off with giving us your concluding statements with the critical thinking?
All right. Thank you, Peter. It's great to be back with you again. So critical thinking sometimes is one of the 21st century skills or practices that in some contexts is the easiest for people to think about as being present in school, but maybe the most challenging. Critical thinking really in the school context most normally is just thinking about problem solving. So thinking about giving students, teachers, learners in general problems, and then having them work through process in order to solve the problems, whether that's individually or collaboratively. We tend to want to encourage the collaborative, but in the Rio School District, not only are we thinking about critical thinking, but we're really thinking about 2 elements of that. And the first is process. So getting students to learn processes for solving problems, such as analysis, data visualization, data representation, discussion as a part of critical thinking. And then also something that it was part of our previous discussions, which is communication and collaboration, seeing that presenting the information and the problem is part of the critical thinking process. So we're working on that, and we are excited. We're most excited, and I think students are most engaged when the problems themselves, this is the highest level of the 4C in my mind, when the students are generating the problems themselves, and they're deeply engaged, they're deeply concerned, and then the adults and the educators come in and facilitate them navigating through the problems. And I can tell you that they really pick some deep problems that aren't just in the minds of children, but are relevant to society at large.
It's good. Now last time, we probably should have changed the order, because this is a lot of pressure on Oscar to follow this man. So
change the order and change clothes too.
There you go. There you go. I noticed you all wore the same thing.
By the way, I'm not wearing that same thing. That's the difference.
So go ahead, give us your conclusion on this particular scene.
Critical thinking goes with collaboration and communication. It's at the highest level of Bloom's taxonomy. It's going through a learning process, and it's owning your learning, and it's applying that in a different setting, in whatever setting you have. I don't know what was it like to be an engineer 30 years ago. You take your plans, you're in an office, and you fax them over to the company in China from Los Angeles. You just imagine nowadays that you're in an office in LA, and within a second you are just taking your knowledge. They have an issue, right? They send it to you. You take your knowledge, you apply it, you come up with a solution, and with your own company in New York, you come up with the solution. 5 minutes later, they have the solution in China for a particular issue in just that setting. The knowledge that you have, you got to be able to just apply it, and it's something that really, it has been there in the past, and as a teacher, you were able to kind of take it in and throwing it back at the students in the classroom. However, without communication and without collaboration, critical thinking comes, without those 2, it really wouldn't happen at the level that is taking place nowadays. Especially for those students who come to the classroom and English is their second language, and in many cases third.
It's interesting. And Dr. Mendoza, we apologize for the squeaky chair we gave you last time.
No problem.
So thanks
I'm
for
glad it
trying
was-
not to move.
I'm
the
just
last
glad it
time.
was the chair, not me.
We're all,
I can attest to that one too. I'm glad that was the chair.
we're all a faithful group. Dr. Mendoza, give us your wisdom on this
Well, here-
particular critical thinking.
Here's the thing about critical thinking as it relates to the three groups that we mentioned last time. The homeless child, the foster child, and the child of migrant farm workers are, for the most part, low-income poverty. The thing about poverty is that, in terms of children, is that it reduces their self-esteem. They don't respect themselves. Therefore, as it relates to critical thinking, in order for you to think critically, you've got to have respect for yourself, confidence in yourself. These three at-risk groups, as we're calling them, at-risk don't have that self-confidence. And therefore, I get back to the point in Rio, the teachers give these children the opportunity to think of a problem, to think of a solution critically, but far more important, not to fear failure in their thinking. And teachers here are unique in the sense that they listen to the child and reinforce positively whatever answer, whatever solution they come up with. My generation of teachers would correct them.
Right.
My generation would say 2 + 2 is not 5, it's 4. Don't you know better? That has changed. If a child says 2 + 2 is 5, the teacher will not say, it's a good answer. But let's see if we can find one that's a little more that positive reinforcement helps the at-risk child to think critically. And that's unique in Rio. They do a great job of that.
I think that was very well said. You give great examples of that. So coming around the mountain, as they say, the last one is creativity. It's so hard to be creative in such a critical environment of education. So we have a challenge there. So Dr. Polisi, why don't you go ahead and give us your conclusion on the creativity portion of education?
Sure. And before I get to that too, I wanted to touch on just something that Joe said that it's just, first of all, it's a real great pleasure to sit with you two because these are just some great thinkers and very synthetic problem solvers right here. We thrust the problem upon them and came out with really just wonderful expressions that made me think about that whole word, critical thinking. The word critical, implies a discrepancy and bridging to the creativity, which is something that is lacking. It's something that's less. And what Joe is talking about is that the learner, in order to move through, to have the grit and to persevere, in order to fail and have the failure actually be a learning experience, they need to have a sense of themselves, and they need to be in an environment that the teacher creates that not only permits it, but actually eventually encourages it. And that's one big shift that we're making in this 21st century, which it could have happened in any century. That what's typical is in those uni-algorithm learning experiences, one answer, you don't have it, can you give it to me? It's either right or wrong spaces, that the students who already come feeling like they don't have it, they are in an environment where of course they don't want to communicate or collaborate and reveal something that they feel that they don't have. But where we create conditions that are a little bit more student-centered, that they then need to build the skills. And I think this is also true of our teaching staff and all of ourselves as educators. We need to look at the things that we are weak at and develop those. Mm-hmm. And the best way to do that, which I know comes from your world, mm-hmm. is through creative play. Mm-hmm. And we forget that the animal world and us, we learn by playing. You're trying out a whole bunch of different things, and you're failing repeatedly over and over again until ultimately something is successful, and then you work and you move on that. So,
right.
So building that bridge from critical thinking, thank you, Joe, for that. The Rio School District is framing creativity in a really broad expanse. It is another great strength of our teaching staff and our kids and our community. Very creative community. We've been talking with KADY about this, that the whole one of the many purposes that we have in beginning these dialogues is letting students and and adults know that you are very creative here. You can learn skills, you can be entrepreneurial, and you can build businesses and careers right here in this hub, and you don't have to go to Los Angeles to do that. Not that there's anything the matter with Los Angeles. I have 2 daughters in Los Angeles, and they're very creative. But that's a big pond down
Sure
there,
enough is.
and that's part of what we're doing here, and part of what I love that KADY is doing is helping kids learn the skills, learn the communication skills, learn to critically think and build things, and entrepreneurially build with 21st century things like video right here. Creativity in the kind of typical, even though typical new 21st century learning frame in education, is often kind of myopically reduced down to divergent thinking. So it gets back to critical thinking. Here, we give you a problem, now you got to solve it. Don't give the answer that everybody else gives. Try to think of a different answer. And that is great. And we want to encourage that. But we need to create authentic problems where innovative and divergent things really are better to have. But in addition to that, the deep, and as long as there have been human endeavors, music, art, theater, speech, drama, technology, engineering, robotics, design, we are making it our business to give every one of our students, including the students in the categories that Joe is representing so beautifully, giving them world-class tools, world-class opportunities. And the school board of the Rio School District, better than any time in my career, has helped us resource, fund, and said yes to things that is making a tremendous difference. That in 3 years' times, we've gone from saxophones in a closet to the Barber of Seville Symphony. And that is done by great teaching, but it's also done by a community and a board and leaders, and the parents and the students are eating it up. And it's those different types of creative aspects that will come together, particularly getting to what you were talking about, Peter, when students are finding and developing some of their passions in school, that we're making even tiny little spaces for that, that they take the skills, academic or otherwise, the language, the critical thinking, and they can package that into creating their life, because ultimately that's our aim. As Yang Zhao's comment is that who came from China, in a place that really tries to do sausage making very well.
Right.
In a very standardized way. He said, the aim of our education is to get our students, our children, out of our basement. And really what he means by that is that they learn themselves, they learn the world, and they are able to go out and decide what they're going to be and make it happen. And if that means more learning or more certification, then they do that. If it means creating a online TV station like KADY, then that's that.
Go for it.
Thank you. You brought up creativity and setting the stage in the classroom. Well, that's C number 5. That's caring. You as a bilingual kid, when you come into a different setting, because you're not used to the customs, or you're not used to the system. That was my experience. You come into a different setting, and you need to find your way. But when you have caring adults who set the stage right, all of a sudden you have those kids who come out of their shell, and they are successful. Okay, but the stage has to be set in the classroom, whether it's K or at the college level. So that's just caring, which is just a basic element that we have as teachers, and we do a great job in our district of caring for our kids and setting and going through the different trainings, setting systems and protocols that is going to set up that we went. Let me give you an example. We went to Rio Real, and one of our teachers was doing circle time. And so we have a newcomer to the classroom. And so the kid has been here, I want to say, less than 12 months. So when it comes to sharing, because the kids take something, they're given a question. Tell us what you will change about the school. What about in my daily life? And so every time this child spoke, the entire class clapped because the teacher was kind of walking the kid through the language, right? The kid had been there, and so somebody was translating, and so the teacher was like, okay, so, ¿qué más quieres? And so then she will translate it, and you will change this. Okay, so when he was done, the entire class will just clap. That setting wasn't just it just didn't happen natural. The teacher needs to create it. That's the first thing. The second thing is creativity. We had an art show last week. The community, they were so proud of our artists, of our kids in third and fourth and fifth. And you're not just talking about paintings. We had our band from Vista. The kids were, we have artists in our community. We just haven't tapped into those, they just don't know it yet. So, one more example. Rio Lindo. We visited some 4th grade classrooms, and the kids were sharing with us their projects, Google projects. They were rewriting the story. They had a PowerPoint in there. They even have a video. So when you talk about, when you're talking creativity, Rio School District is in the cutting edge for technology, how to create artifacts in a Google Classroom. You're talking about music. You're talking about the arts. You're talking about intramurals. It's just, we are in the cutting edge. I've only been here 3 months, and I'm telling you, every kid has access to, every kid like me, a newcomer, we have access to the latest and the greatest. So
that's exciting. You know, applause I always think is a byproduct of emotions.
yeah.
And so to hear you say that gives me goosebumps and saying we need more applauses taking place for emotional responses.
Yes.
So bring us home here, Dr. Mendoza.
One of the unique positions that I had, with all due respect to my colleagues and friends, is that old age. I'm the oldest here, so I have the advantage of looking back and seeing what Oxnard was like in the 30s and now, and what education was like in the 30s. Creativity was non-existent. The thing about being poor and living in Oxnard was segregated. We couldn't go to the theater, for example, and there was an entrance that we could enter, but it was through the back up on the balcony. That has changed completely. But someone once said, you see the world not as it is, you see the world as you are. The homeless, foster, and migrants see the world entirely different than their colleagues who were born and raised here and have a home and have parents. And their perception of the world is very narrow and very dreary. And so creativity is just not part of the world that they see. And so what the Rio District does is try to create a world where they will fit in. The thing about Rio is that it recognizes diversity, but it celebrates commonality. That's the change that Rio does. All the kids have in common the opportunity to be creative, rich or poor. It really doesn't matter. And that's the thing that I think homeless, foster, and migrant kids in Rio are experiencing. They come in seeing a world very narrow, very uncaring, very frightening, and destined for failure. Poverty prepares you for that, for failure, not success. Rio comes in and says, look at this video, look at this robotics. And they sit there and suddenly realize they can be creative. That's the secret to the success, I think, in part, if not large part, to the Rio staff and personnel. They create opportunities for creativity. And the children whose perception of life is so narrow and so dreary suddenly begin to see another world that they can fit in because of the commonality they have with others. That's not bad.
Right.
Did you write that down?
Right, no, right.
We recorded it.
No, right.
No, and that was a great way to conclude. We have a lot of C's now. Is there any C's I may have missed? Because there's so many. There's the caring, there's the Common Core,
Right.
and so California. But did it miss anything? That are we good to go with this part? Because I thought all four of them were just spectacular.
Well, and I really love that Oscar got in our fifth C. The four C are kind of like a common thread that are moving across the country, which is great in education. Those four C's, and they have a few other ones: global awareness, entrepreneurship.
Right.
But the Rio fifth C is about caring, and the part of that we have already kind of illuminated is that it's a strength. It's a caring community, caring families, tremendously caring staff, tremendously caring school system as well, and very interagency. The parts of that we're also working on and trying to help those students that Joe was talking about, but every student as well, is to care about themselves, to care about the quality of the work, to care about their efforts, to care about their future by being active in their future, setting goals, thinking about the future, and then beyond that, which is a more traditional but an important thing, to care about their community, care about their global community, and those are a lot of the strengths of our students. So we like to put that 5C in there. I would just say that among the things that we're working the hardest at, and we're very focused on, is getting students to bridge from that frame that Joe's talking about, regardless of where they're at socioeconomically, and to one where they care deeply about academics, because the big challenge with all of these 4Cs and 5Cs is we are shifting our school district, and school districts across the nation and world are shifting. We're part of a group called Ed Leader 21, leading districts across the nation that are shifting. But in the meantime, while we're shifting those things, some things are not shifting. Our accountability systems, our standardized testing, those things are still have the gravitas, have the weight. There are still the things that are being counted. Now we're working on ways to measure and count and have rubrics if needed for creativity and for critical thinking. What we want our students also to be able to have the academic chops and the standardized test scores and the literacies, and that is the double challenge. We just think that work in the 4 C's is a better soil for producing literacy, speaking, reading, and writing, while simultaneously working on the individual development. And I think one of I knew if we got Joe and Oscar here that profound things would come out, because they are profound. They both lived exactly the experience that we are trying to inhabit, and they're living models of what good schooling in American public education can produce. But beyond that, they really articulate really well some really key universals, and among those things is that that knowing the self and being inside of a caring condition, that isn't enough. The world that Joe talked about that is so hard when you're on the bottom end. It's hard for all kids, and it produces tremendous stress and pressure. That's our economy. And so that's where, of course, we have the caring and the creativity and the drive, and we work on all of that, but we also need to have all of that conjure, by the time our students leave us, the ability to read, write, speak, think, do mathematics in English, because that is the get past go, collect your $200, let you move on. And so that's really the challenge. But here at the Rio School District, and with both of my colleagues here, we're not only preparing for the world and preparing our students for the world, we're also trying to reconstruct schools and schooling themselves. So we're building ways to measure these 21st century skills, and we hope more of our colleagues and other folks via this video or others and parents will understand that you may have a student who comes in not speaking English. You're not going to expect them to have a test score. But their indicator, they might be a great collaborator, a great speaker, or a great critical thinking problem. I can tell you, I work with students every week that are tremendous in science and math creatively. Their skill sets in reading and writing are not there yet, but it is our responsibility, along with them and their parents, to get them by the time they leave us to have those literacy skills along with other those things. And I'm very hopeful because of the work of our teachers and our teacher leaders, and I'm most hopeful because I work with them. I just was working with students today. I'm very hopeful about this generation of Oxnard youth and Rio youth. They are powerfully good at the 4 C's.
I love it.
And we need to be responsible to get them to the literacies that the system is still demanding them have every year on accountability system. So thank you very much.
No, I love it. Thank you very much. And I conclude by just dreaming that one of these days students are going to complain that they don't have enough homework. There's going to be a time where teachers have to realize that there might be 2 kids in the class that may be able to explain this subject a little bit better than them.
Yeah.
And so, that's what we have to do. We need to dream, and I'm going to conclude by just saying thank you so much for watching. Thank you, gentlemen. This is Peter Godinez, your ambassador with KADY TV. Until next time. All right, I know we broke